The sun had just started sliding behind the jagged peaks of the Rockies when I first heard it. Music. Not the faint hum of a neighbor's stereo, not the casual strum of an acoustic guitar on a porch. No, this was bass. Heavy, pounding bass, rolling over the pine trees like a war drum. I set down the chainsaw I'd been using to cut deadfall and listened. My land stretched across 200 acres just outside Livingston, Montana, bordered by nothing but a rusted cattle fence and the kind of wild silence you only find where cell service dies. I bought it after retiring early from law enforcement, looking for peace, quiet, and space for the animals I'd dedicated my life to. Grizzlies. Most folks don't know it's legal in Montana to keep them under strict licensing, and I'd spent years building enclosures, working with wildlife officials, and rescuing bears from situations that would have otherwise put them down. They weren't pets. They weren't toys. They were my responsibility, and they demanded respect. But as the bass thumped louder, rattling the windows of my cabin, I felt my jaw tighten. Something wasn't right. I hopped in my truck, following the noise down the dirt road toward the southern fence line. That's when I saw the lights. Not headlights, party lights. Strings of them, draped between my ponderosis. SUVs and shiny sedans lined up like a parking lot at a stadium. And in the middle of it all, right there on my private land, was a crowd of well-dressed people laughing, drinking, and dancing around bonfires they'd built on my grass. I pulled over hard, gravel spitting under my tires. My boots hit the dirt with a crunch. "What the hell?" I muttered. A woman in a sequin dress stumbled past me with a red Solo cup, barely giving me a glance. "You made it," she shouted over the music. "Bar's over there." "Bar?" I pushed through the throng, trying to make sense of it. And then I saw the banner strung between two trees, flapping in the smoky night air. HOA Summer Bash, welcome residents. I froze. The Homeowners Association. My blood ran hot just thinking about them. I'd clashed with their board for years back when I still lived in town. Petty citations. Ridiculous bylaws. Harassment over what color I painted my mailbox. Finally, I told them to shove it and bought land far beyond their jurisdiction. Or so I thought. And here they were, on my property, throwing a full-blown rager. My fists clenched. They didn't know. They had no idea what lived just beyond the tree line, behind reinforced fencing and electrified barriers. The bears were restless when strangers approached. Music and smoke made them agitated. And the HOA, drunk and clueless, had built their party right against the northern enclosure. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't just trespassing. This was a disaster waiting to happen. I took a breath, steadying my voice, but it came out like a growl. They picked the wrong land to party on. I shoved through clusters of laughing strangers, their perfume, cologne, and beer breath thick in the air. Nobody seemed to notice that I wasn't part of their suburban circus. The HOA had rented a DJ, his booth perched on my picnic table, of all places, and the bass was strong enough to rattle the bolts in the wood. I found the one man I knew would be at the center of this mess, Gregory Stokes, HOA president. A man with a jawline as tight as his rules, the type who wore golf polos like a second skin and thought he could bend the world with his smug grin. And there he was, standing near the bonfire with a drink in hand, holding court like some king of the cul-de-sac. "Stokes," I barked. He turned, confused at first, then smirked when he recognized me. Well, Mr. Wilderness himself. "Didn't think you'd leave your cave." "This," I said, motioning to the entire carnival, "is my land." He sipped his drink without flinching. "Correction, this is community land the HOA has managed since the county adjusted the zoning. You'd know that if you came to meetings." My stomach tightened. Zoning disputes had been in limbo for months. The county clerk kept sending conflicting paperwork. I'd been fighting it through legal channels, but I didn't think the HOA would actually push onto my property. "You're trespassing," I said flatly. "Shut it down. Now." Greg chuckled and leaned closer, his cologne stinging my nose. "Relax, Daniel. We're neighbors. You've got more space than you could ever need. Nobody's getting hurt." The words barely left his mouth when I heard it, a deep, guttural roar from the tree line. Conversations halted. Laughter choked into silence. The music stuttered as the DJ looked up, startled. Another roar, louder this time, reverberated through the pines. Glasses trembled in hands. Someone screamed. Greg frowned. "What the hell was that?" I swallowed hard. "That," I said, my voice low, is why you don't build bonfires next to my north enclosure. The crowd shifted, unease spreading like wildfire. A mother clutched her daughter. A man dropped his beer and muttered, "Bear. It's a bear." The third roar shattered the night. It came with a crash, with splintering, metal groaning. My heart seized. The fence. People screamed and stumbled, some running toward their cars, others toward the bonfire for light. The DJ bolted from his booth, music cutting off mid-beat. Greg grabbed my arm. What did you do?" I jerked free. "It's not what I did. It's what you just unleashed." I sprinted toward the tree line, boots pounding the dirt. In the smoky firelight, I saw it. A shadow, massive and lumbering, moving with purpose. My oldest rescue, a 900-pound grizzly named Samson, pressed against the weakened fence. Sparks flickered along the electrified wire, but the party's smoke and noise had driven him into a frenzy. The metal groaned again. Then, snap. The crowd's shrieks tore through the night, and Samson stepped out of the dark. Samson's head broke through the gap in the fence first, his fur catching firelight like molten bronze. His chest heaved, nostrils flaring, catching the scent of alcohol, perfume, and panic. The crowd scattered in every direction, some tripping over lawn chairs, others screaming so loudly they drowned out the crackle of the bonfire. I raised my hands instinctively, stepping toward the bear. "Easy, Samson." "Easy, boy." My voice was low, steady, the same tone I'd used since the day I rescued him from a canned hunting ranch. But Samson wasn't listening. His eyes darted wildly, pupils huge, the pounding bass still echoing in his skull. "Jesus Christ," Greg shouted, backing up. "You're insane. There's a grizzly loose." I whipped around on him. "Shut up. Don't run. Don't scream. He'll see you as prey." Too late. A teenager sprinted across the open ground, wailing. Samson lunged, a blur of fur and muscle, the earth shaking beneath his paws. The kid stumbled, shrieked, and braced for the end. But Samson stopped short, towering over him, jaws open, hot breath steaming in the night air. Then, with a guttural roar that made my bones rattle, he turned his attention back to the crowd. Chaos erupted. Cars screeched as engines roared to life. Tires spun in mud. Glass shattered. People shoved each other, desperate to escape, and the smell of burning wood thickened as someone knocked over a tiki torch into the dry grass. "Samson!" I shouted again, my throat raw. I ran forward, planting myself between him and the nearest cluster of panicked partygoers. My pulse hammered. My brain screamed that I was insane. But I'd made a vow when I took these animals in. I'd protect them from people and protect people from them. Samson's massive head swung toward me, teeth flashing. His roar was so close I felt the spit on my face. "Remember me, buddy," I whispered. "It's me, Daniel." His paw, the size of a dinner plate, slammed the ground inches from my boots. The impact rattled up my legs. For a split second, it felt like he'd crush me. But then, something in his gaze softened, recognition flickering in his dark eyes. Behind me, I heard a shriek. I turned just in time to see another grizzly, my younger female, Willow, slipping through the busted fence, driven mad by the scent of roasted meat from the party's grill. Two of them. Loose. "Oh God," I muttered. The HOA crowd surged in panic. Some ran toward the road, others toward the cabin. Greg was frozen, white as a sheet, clutching his solo cup like it was a shield. The fire spread, flames licking higher, smoke billowing. I stood in the middle of it all, two half-wild beasts on one side, dozens of terrified people on the other, and the land I'd fought to keep turning into a battlefield. "Everybody," I roared, my voice carrying over the chaos. "Get back to the cars, now." The ground quaked as Samson and Willow advanced. And I realized I was the only thing standing between the HOA and a massacre. The firelight painted everything in gold and shadow, a surreal battlefield between man and beast. Samson huffed, circling, while Willow padded forward, sniffing at a spilled cooler of burgers. Her claws scraped metal, sparks flashing as she overturned it. The crowd gasped, frozen between fleeing and fainting. I had seconds to make a call. My training, my years with these animals, my gut, they all screamed the same thing. I dug into my pocket, fingers fumbling for the emergency whistle I carried everywhere. Not a dog whistle. This one was designed for the bears, high-pitched, sharp, a sound I'd trained them to recognize as a command to retreat. I raised it to my lips and blew with everything in me. The shrill note cut through the night like a blade. Samson jerked his head, ears twitching. Willow froze mid-prowl. For a tense heartbeat, the world held still. The crackle of flames, the whimper of terrified neighbors, the pounding of my own heart. Then, slowly, Samson stepped back. Willow followed, reluctant but obedient, her amber eyes still glowing with hunger. I blew again, backing toward the broken fence. "Come on, back home, both of you." To my shock and relief, they obeyed. With heavy, deliberate steps, the two grizzlies turned, retreating into the shadows of the tree line. Samson let out one last earth-shaking roar, more warning than rage, before disappearing into the dark. The silence that followed was deafening. When I turned back, the HOA crowd was staring at me as if I'd just performed witchcraft. Faces pale, eyes wide, mouths open. Greg's drink finally slipped from his hand, splashing into the dirt. You keep bears?" he stammered. I walked past him, grabbed the DJ's water cooler, and dumped it on the spreading flames, stamping out the rest with my boots. Smoke curled up, bitter and acrid. "Not keep," I said, my voice gravel. "Protect." They were rescued. They've got more right to this land than you do. Greg swallowed hard, his bravado gone. You could have gotten us all killed." I spun on him, fury boiling up. "You trespassed. You built a damn bonfire on my fence line. Do you have any idea what would have happened if I wasn't here?" No one answered. Mothers held their kids close. Men who'd been laughing minutes earlier now looked like schoolboys caught in the act. Finally, I stepped back, wiping sweat and soot from my face. "Get off my land. All of you. And don't come back." They didn't argue. Cars roared to life, headlights cutting through the smoke, tires chewing up my dirt road as the HOA scattered into the night. When the last engine faded, I stood alone under the stars, chest heaving, the smell of pine and ash hanging heavy in the air. I walked back to the fence, running my hand along the broken posts. Samson and Willow were out there somewhere, settling down, hearts still racing like mine. I whispered into the night, half to them, half to myself, "This land is ours, and no one takes it from us." The Rockies loomed above, silent witnesses. The night returned to stillness, broken only by the faint call of an owl. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the HOA would never forget what they saw here. Neither would I.